It was a simple and direct question, and it deserved a simple and direct answer, John Montero believed. "How long have you been sleeping with Aaron?" he asked his wife Tracy, with whom he had been married for 22 years, in a near whisper as she entered the dark kitchen and he caught her off guard by turning on the light. Tracy muttered something unintelligible because she realized halfway through that John apparently knew much more than she had believed. She knew it was unwise to get caught up in another lie. "About 5 years," she whispered, keeping her eyes fixed on the table. "Does the whole department know?" "Yes," she whispered again. "Damn it. You've been sleeping with this guy for 5 years and everyone knows except your stupid husband. I guess it's my fault for trusting you so much. Is there anyone else I should know about, girl?" Tracy was in shock. John had never spoken to her harshly before, even when they argued. She saw the anger in his eyes and was grateful that John wasn't a violent man. Tracy's head was spinning. When and how had John found out about Aaron? Maybe he was at the award ceremony? It didn't make any sense to Tracy because John had never been to an award ceremony at the university before, but the timing of the argument was too coincidental. However, she believed that nothing had happened at the award ceremony that could have revealed their affair. John was late for the award ceremony. Tracy told him not to go, as it was just a dinner in honor of various employees in the university's academic departments. Tracy was the administrator of the English department. The department had 5 professors, a dean, an assistant dean, an administrator, and a secretary. She had worked at the university for 15 years and was due to receive an award for her 15 years of service that year. Her husband usually worked an extra hour on Fridays, so she knew he probably wouldn't even consider going to the event. Damn. He hadn't been to a single staff dinner in the last 14 years, so she didn't believe he would go to this one, even though she was receiving an award. To be honest, she didn't want him to come, but she told him about the dinner so he couldn't accuse her of not letting him know. John didn't promise to come, but he knew he would go to honor his wife's memory. He believed she would have been very happy with such a surprise. That's what you do when you love someone, he thought to himself. Due to traffic, he was a little late and arrived at the dinner 10 minutes after it had started. Almost everyone had already passed the buffet and sat down at the tables, mostly in groups according to their departments. John looked for Tracy and found her at a table for 15 people, where the English department staff and, apparently, several couples were sitting. John noticed that Tracy was sitting between the assistant dean, Jason Peterson, and Professor Aaron McClary. He noticed that there were no seats available at that table, so he walked past the buffet and sat down at a table at the back of the hall, deciding that he would find his wife and congratulate her after she received her badge. As expected, the program was boring, but finally it was time for the English department. When his wife was called, she stood up and walked over to the dean, Dr. Stephen Engelbert, to receive her badge. As she walked toward the podium, John couldn't help but feel proud that she looked 10 years younger than her 46 years. She weighed maybe a pound more than when they got married, even though they had 2 children, and her dark brown hair, falling to her shoulders, accentuated her fair, almost alabaster skin. After she received her badge and headed back to the table, John got up from his seat and walked over to congratulate her and surprise her. She beat him to it, and when she reached the table, John noticed that Aaron had also stood up, apparently to congratulate her as well. In the few years John had known him, Aaron had seemed like a nice enough guy, and John didn't think anything of it until Tracy walked over to Aaron, put her hands on his forearms, and kissed him on the lips. John froze in place and just stood there with his mouth open. No one at the table seemed to notice, perhaps because at first glance it didn't look very demonstrative, but to John it spoke volumes. It was a simple gesture, but it was so intimate and familiar, the kind of thing a husband and wife would do, or judging by their appearance, a woman and her longtime lover. John suddenly felt nauseous and his legs began to shake. He immediately turned around and left the room, found the bathroom, and vomited everything in his stomach. He cleaned himself up and drove home, thinking about everything and nothing for the 20 minutes it took him to get there. When John got home, it was just after 9, and he knew he had about 2 hours to come up with something. Tracy was due home around 11, as she always was after such events, and it occurred to him that her punctuality was probably one of the reasons he trusted her so completely, and one of the things she used to hide her affair. Don't do anything unusual and your unsuspecting husband won't notice a thing, John believed. Thinking along these lines, John came to some other conclusions. He realized that every time Tracy came home late at night, she would say a quick hello and go upstairs to wash off the day, as she put it. Then she would come back downstairs freshly washed, smelling slightly of new perfume. He had never put 2 and 2 together to realize that she was probably masking the smell on her body. Of course, on those nights, he and Tracy never had sex either, as she always claimed to be too tired. At around 10:55, John took a bottle of red wine out of the refrigerator and poured 2 glasses onto the kitchen table. He went into the living room, turned on the lights and the TV, then returned to the dark kitchen and sat down at the table. 10 minutes later, Tracy pulled up to the garage and entered the kitchen. She was about to call her husband when the lights in the kitchen suddenly came on. John wasn't in his study. He was in the kitchen. "Uh-oh," Tracy stammered. John looked like he had eaten a lemon. He pointed to the other glass of wine and took a sip from his own. "Why?" John croaked. "I loved you with all my heart and believed you loved me. We raised 2 wonderful children. What happened to until death do us part?" "I'm sorry, John. It just happened. I know it sounds like nonsense, but it's true. He's been here for 2 years and we became friends. Then it turned into something more. Then the dean found out, and then others did. The dean just asked us to respect the university, and after a while it became normal. I became his work wife in every sense of the word. And then we just found time when we could. You just trusted me completely, and that made our lives easier." "Well, how could I have been so stupid as to trust a woman I love? I'm sorry for that," John said sarcastically. "And my infrequent trips must have been very helpful to you, too." Tracy blushed and lowered her eyes. John got his answer. "I love 2 men. You may not believe it's possible, but it's true. I love both of you and tried my best not to hurt you. You didn't lack love, attention, or physical intimacy. I was always there for you," Tracy whispered with tears in her eyes. "At least until recently," John replied. "When did he get ahead of me? In the last few months, you've started to pull away from me emotionally, and you haven't asked me for sex in a long time. You agree if I want to, but you don't initiate it. And when we make love, I don't feel that passion anymore. Do you believe him? Aaron has been having problems with his wife lately, and I may have gotten a little caught up in his problems." "So your second husband is married too, and he has problems with his first wife? Problems? I assume she doesn't know about your relationship." "As far as we know, none of you knew about this relationship. We were very careful. We didn't want to hurt any of you." "No!" John shouted. "You were careful because you didn't want to get caught. Did you even know what would happen if you got caught?" "How did you catch us?" Tracy asked quietly. "Trying to change the future?" John asked mockingly. "Ah, what difference does it make now? I didn't catch you. You gave yourselves up." Tracy's eyes widened. "What?" "I was 10 minutes late for the banquet. I had to sit in the back row. I saw the kiss." "The kiss? That little kiss? It doesn't mean anything. How could you tell from a kiss?" she asked. "Because it wasn't demonstrative. It was just an intimate little kiss and touch, like you've done with me 1,000 times in the past, but not lately," John said. "I may have been the only one in the room who noticed." Tracy blushed and fidgeted. She decided not to answer. "Why did you come to the awards ceremony?" she finally asked. because I saw that we were drifting apart, and I wanted to be close to you so that maybe we could be together again. To talk about things that shouldn't be talked about. I'm sorry, John. I didn't mean to hurt you. How can we come to some kind of agreement so we can move on? Tracy asked. Move on? Are you serious? John asked, looking completely shocked. I'm calling my lawyer first thing Monday morning. What if I'm not sure I want a divorce? What if you're not sure you want a divorce? That's your problem. Because I'm sure I want a divorce, John said. You can't love two men when you made a vow to me. And I'm definitely not going to be the second husband. Maybe we just need to slow down a little, John. I still love you, but I also love another man. I don't understand why we have to rush into a divorce, Tracy said, trying to look as sincere as possible in front of John. I don't understand why you're making me the villain in this situation. Well, I'm certainly not the villain here. I'm not the one who cheated on you for 5 years. John stood up and poured most of his wine into the kitchen sink. He climbed heavily up the stairs to the bedroom. Tracy went into the living room and picked up the phone. He knows, she said quietly into her iPhone. He's talking about divorce. She listened intently to the person on the other end of the line. No, I have no idea. I wasn't planning on it at this point, she replied to the question. Yes, I love you too. Tracy hung up, sat down in the living room, sipped her wine, and ignored what was on TV. She went to the kitchen for another glass and repeated everything from the beginning. She really loved Aaron, and although she didn't love John as much as she had at first, she believed she still had strong feelings for him. She remembered what John had said about her distancing herself from him lately and pressed her palms to her temples. After thinking about it, she realized that John was probably right. She had been closer to Aaron in recent weeks. Over the past year, she and Aaron had talked about marriage several times, and Aaron and his wife, whom he had been married to for 17 years, had been having problems in recent months, although Aaron said he didn't think she knew about his affair. When Tracy went upstairs, John wasn't in the bedroom. She saw that their eldest daughter's door was closed and decided that John was letting her know he wanted to talk. Their eldest daughter was a junior at Michigan State University, and their youngest was a freshman at Ball State University, and Tracy believed that having their children in college was probably a good thing at the moment. When Tracy finally woke up, John was mowing the lawn in the spring sunshine. She went out into the yard and looked at him, gesturing for him to come in when he looked up at her. He shook his head vigorously and continued mowing. After standing in the yard for a couple of minutes with her hands on her hips, Tracy got into her car and drove away. John assumed she was going to the grocery store, as she usually did on Saturdays, but he wasn't sure, and to be honest, he didn't care. He had a lot to do. As soon as Tracy was out of sight, John went into the house to call his children and explain the situation. Both were shocked by his news, but John explained that he had seen them kissing and that Tracy had admitted to him that she was cheating on him. You saw them kissing, and Mom just admitted she's sleeping with this guy? His eldest daughter, Katie, asked him. It's not so much the kiss as the way they kissed, as if they'd been doing it for years. There was that familiar feeling of intimacy that exists between a husband and wife. She broke my heart. I'm so sorry, Dad. I really am, said Katie. Tracy and John usually ate dinner out on Saturdays, but John cleaned up and left before Tracy returned from the grocery store in the afternoon. She wasn't entirely surprised when he didn't return for dinner, but she knew it was out of character for him to be rude and not call. Finally, around 10:30, he came in, grunted at Tracy, and went upstairs to the older child's room to go to bed. John woke up to the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. Hungover and red-eyed, he went downstairs and poured himself a cup of coffee. Sitting at her end of the kitchen table, Tracy said nothing until John plopped down at the table. Let's act like adults, Tracy said with some smugness. That hasn't worked very well the last few weeks, has it? John replied with equal smugness. Okay, John, We've already discussed this. I'm sorry it happened, but I still love you. I love both of you. Let's try to figure out how we can make this work for both of us." "We can't make this work for both of us," John replied, "because it doesn't work for me. You made a vow before God and everyone that we would be faithful to each other forever. You broke that vow, that sacred vow. Not to mention breaking my heart. You and your lover need to figure something out. I'm leaving." "You can just throw away 22 years of marriage," Tracy cried. "I made a mistake. A mistake." "No, it would have been a mistake once," John said, "but it went on for years. You lived for it. You wanted it. You made your choice. It wasn't my choice. Now you can go to him and be his forever." "But I don't want that, John," she said. "I love you both. I do. Give me time to figure things out. For all of us." "For all of us!" John shouted. "There is no all of us, and there is certainly no us." John turned and walked away, heading for the bathroom. When he came out and returned to the kitchen, Tracy was gone. She left a note taped to the bathroom door asking him not to do anything rash until they talked. "She's probably doing it with that jerk," John believed. Tracy did go to Aaron's, but the couple did not have sex. "Looks like our plans have changed," Aaron said. "I'm not ready for this, Aaron," Tracy admitted. "I know we've talked about it, and I really want this, but I still love him, and I'm not ready to let go. We have a past, kids. I loved him for almost 25 years, and you don't forget something like that." John admitted the same thing to himself at home. Although he wasn't usually very emotional, he couldn't hold back the tears that quickly streamed down his cheeks. He drank a shot of Don Julio tequila, comforting himself with the warmth rising in his stomach. He sat down at the kitchen table and made a to-do list for the next few days. He smiled sadly to himself, realizing that the absence of children in the house made his plans easier. "Damn," he muttered. On Monday morning, John asked his boss for the day off. His boss, Stan, had known John for over 15 years, and the only time John had ever asked for time off was when his parents died. He knew that something very bad had happened in John's life. Of course, the fact that John looked like he hadn't slept in days might have given Stan a second clue. "No problem, John," Stan said. "Is there anything I can do to help?" John hesitated, but then couldn't hold back and told Stan the whole story. "Damn, I'm so sorry, John. I've been married almost as long as you, so I can't give you any good advice other than to ask if you've considered all your options, including reconciliation. Have you asked yourself if you'd be better off with her or without her? I know it sounds corny, but I've asked myself that question at least 100 times, Stan, and I've always come to the same answer. She's had a second husband for 5 years, and they've been discussing how she's going to leave me for him. I can't share her with someone else, and I can't live with that kind of disrespect. I love her and I hate her, and I can never trust her. She's a lying bitch, Stan. I know I don't deserve a lying bitch." Tracy fought for the marriage, but she was smart enough to start making alternative plans with Aaron. 6 months later, John was a free man for the first time in almost 25 years. Deep down, he knew he still loved Tracy, but he couldn't share his wife. He knew that if he hadn't found out about Tracy's betrayal, he would have had to deal with it sooner or later, and not necessarily from a position of strength. The couple divided their finances in half and agreed to sell the house. The children were naturally upset by the divorce, but they understood that there was nothing they could do to change John's mind. Only Tracy's parents seemed to be against the divorce and begged John throughout the process to do more to save the marriage. John really loved his mother and father-in-law and tried not to hurt their feelings. "She says she loves us both. I'm not like that, so I made the decision for her," John said. While the divorce was going through in court, John agonized over whether to tell Aaron's wife about her husband's years of infidelity. He knew it would look like revenge, but he also knew that he would have preferred to be told rather than left in the lurch. On the day the divorce was finalized, John called Aaron's wife and broke her heart. The McClaris were about 5 years younger than Montero and had 2 children, ages 15 and 12. John was especially concerned about how this would affect the McClaris' children. "I'm really sorry I have to be the bearer of bad news, but I couldn't not tell you. I would have felt like I was lying to you," John told Aaron's wife, Letty. Literally the next day, John received an angry note from his ex-wife. "You must feel like a real man destroying Aaron's marriage," she yelled at John over the phone. "Tell me, for God's sake, why did you believe I would be an accomplice in your deception of this innocent woman, girl?" John replied sharply. "If you love each other so much, confess to her and be honest with this woman. She never did anything to you, you homewrecker." To John's surprise, Tracy fell silent on the other end of the line. He heard a muffled goodbye. Although John was confident in his abilities in bed, Tracy was his only love in his first 47 years, and he hadn't been on a date in about 25 years. He understood perfectly well that his sex life might never be the same again. However, John didn't take into account the number of single women over 40, more than 50% of whom were divorced. Word spread at John's work that he was now available, and single women between the ages of 25 and 65 made sure that John, who had always kept himself in good shape, knew they were available. On the rare occasions when he stopped by his favorite bar, he found himself lacking company. Some time passed, and John began to take advantage of his wealth of choice from time to time. Eventually, John's emotional wounds healed, and life returned to a more peaceful state. McClary's divorce wasn't as smooth as Montero's, but after 18 months, Tracy and Aaron got married. Montero's 2 children didn't warm up to Aaron and mostly stayed with John when they were home, while McClary's children stayed with Aaron and his new wife only every other weekend. Tracy tried her best, but she never really grew to love Aaron's children. Over time, this ceased to be an issue for the couple. Although Tracy enjoyed being Aaron's working wife, after a few months, she grew tired of her role as his full-time spouse. Tracy couldn't figure out what the problem was, whether she missed John, whether Aaron was too close to her, or whether she really needed a more fulfilling life with 2 men. Whatever the reason, the couple divorced 3 years later. At 52, John was still in good shape, although his dark brown hair was streaked with gray. He had no trouble with women and went on 1 or 2 dates a week. After a hard day at the office, he stopped by his favorite bar for a sandwich and a couple of drinks. He was sitting at the bar and had just started eating his sandwich when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "Hi, stranger. Mind if I join you?" John didn't need to turn around to know that the voice belonged to his ex-wife. He took a sip of his drink with difficulty. "What would you like to drink, Tracy?" he asked, offering her a seat. "The same as always, John. I know you haven't forgotten." "Cal, a glass of Chablis for the lady, please. It's on me." While the bartender poured the wine, John looked at his ex-wife for the first time in almost 5 years. Her blonde hair was a couple of inches longer, her waist a couple of inches wider, and there were crow's feet at the corners of her eyes, but she was still a damn beautiful woman, and John had to admit it. "How about a truce at Katie's wedding, John?" Tracy asked. "I didn't know we were enemies," John replied. "Until a minute ago, you hadn't said a word to me since the divorce," Tracy reminded him. "You don't show up at family events. You didn't even come to Katie's engagement party. Our eldest daughter is getting married next year, and you need to be there. It's important to her, John." "If it's important to Katie, it's important to me. I'll be there and do whatever she asks. You take care of the arrangements, and I'll cover the expenses." Tracy smiled sadly at John. "I remember how you used to treat me, John. I don't know how I could have been so stupid and taken your love, for granted." John held out his right hand to her. Tracy took his hand. Before leaving the bar 2 hours later, Tracy took John's cell phone number. They agreed to do everything they could to make Katie's wedding unforgettable. 3 weeks later, John met Katie and his ex at lunch to discuss wedding plans. The meeting went well, and as John was about to return to work, he almost reflexively invited Tracy to dinner the following Friday. Tracy beamed, and Katie looked more than surprised and raised her eyebrows at her father. When Tracy opened the door on Friday evening, John was a little surprised by her version of the infamous little black dress. "Wow, very nice, Mrs. McClary," John muttered. Tracy's smile immediately turned to a guilty expression. "I'm sorry. That's not what I meant," John said. "I'm sorry, too. I let you down. Damn, I let myself down," Tracy added. Dinner was at one of the best Italian restaurants in town, followed by an exhibition at one of the city's galleries. The couple mostly talked about their children and a little about what they had been doing since their divorces. Tracy told John that after her divorce from Aaron, she had transferred to a business school at the university, which, after 20 years of working in the English department, felt like divorcing a large family. "When I do something stupid, I do it big," she said with an embarrassed smile. Both enjoyed the evening, and Tracy offered John a drink when she walked him to the door. He politely declined, saying, "Maybe next time." That phrase did not escape Tracy's attention, and she smiled broadly. On their third date, Tracy managed to seduce John. She found that John had become more experienced and aggressive, and had also learned a few new tricks. "Why did I give this up?" Tracy muttered to herself as she came to her senses. John realized that Tracy was asking herself a rhetorical question and was tactful enough not to respond. Over the next few months, John and Tracy met twice more, and both times they ended up in bed. Although John viewed these evenings as nothing more than sex with a beautiful ex-girlfriend, he knew that Tracy was beginning to see something more in these dates. Katie confirmed this when she and John had dinner together again. "You do realize that Mom believes you two have a chance to get back together, right?" Katie asked as she sat down with John at the restaurant. "She's excited like a schoolgirl. Your dates have given her the impression that you really care about her. But she knows I'm still seeing other women. I've told her that repeatedly. I've never lied to your mother, not then, not now. She's a beautiful woman, a sexy woman. I don't mind sleeping with a sexy woman. I'm a healthy man." "Okay, Dad, I understand. But this is a woman who believed she could have 2 husbands and that you would agree to it. She has already shown that she doesn't always judge situations correctly when it comes to sexual relationships." "I understand, baby. I'll back off." Over the next few months, Tracy hinted several times that she would like to go on a date with him, but John kept his promise to Katie, partly because he had found the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. In fact, she was the one who found him, knocking him off his feet at the local supermarket on a Saturday when she hit him with her shopping cart. "What the?" John yelled as he fell to the floor of the local Kroger supermarket after being hit by another shopping cart. John looked up and saw a tall, thin blonde woman in her 50s with her hand over her mouth, staring at him. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," said the angular blonde. "I was looking for Saffron, pushing the cart, and I wasn't looking—" John practically jumped off the floor. "Hey, it's okay," he almost shouted. "I'm fine." John's eyes filled with tears as he spoke. Without thinking, he glanced at the woman's left hand, looking for a ring. Seeing that there was no jewelry on her hand, he smiled to himself. "Some men will do anything to meet a beautiful woman. I'm one of them." "I admit I'm shameless," John said. She wiped her green eyes with her sleeve and returned with a broad smile. "Hello, shameless man. I'm Rhonda. Rhonda Shires, actually." Rhonda turned out to be a 50-year-old woman who had divorced her husband of 20 years 10 years ago because of his infidelity. Since then, she had dated men on and off, but nothing serious. Although she felt awkward after meeting John, she quickly realized that this might be the best thing she had done in a long time. "He's handsome," she believed as John jumped toward her. John and Rhonda went on their first date a week later. They had planned to have dinner and go to the movies, but they enjoyed talking so much that they decided to skip the movies and go to a quiet bar to have a drink, dinner, and chat. That first date led to 6 more. If this guy isn't Jack the Ripper, then why did any woman ever let him get away? Rhonda asked herself as she fell asleep in John's arms. 3 months later, John invited Rhonda to Katie's wedding. Tracy confessed to Katie that she had hoped John would invite her. The wedding went off without a hitch. The bride was beautiful, and her parents were incredibly proud of their daughter. Sitting at the family table with Rhonda, Tracy, and Katie's godparents, Robert and Sil Morton, John was the perfect host, making sure that conversation and laughter, as well as champagne, flowed all night long. He also made sure to dance with all 3 women at the table several times during the evening. It was late when John and Rhonda, arm in arm as usual, left the dance floor, and Rhonda excused herself to go to the restroom. Before leaving, she leaned over to John, whispered something in his ear, touched his cheek, and kissed him on the lips. Tracy noticed that Rhonda's eyes were shining as she left, and John's eyes were shining when he sat down. "I really hate to say this, but you need to put a ring on that woman's finger, John," Tracy said, as the Mortons, old friends of the family, looked at them with smiles on their faces. "A wise old friend once told me that the devil is in the details. Love isn't in kisses that melt steel, but in comfortable, tender kisses. It's in the light touch of fingers, in gentle caresses. A few months ago, when we saw each other several times, I believed I had a chance to win you back. But when I thought back on those dates, I realized that we never touched each other as tenderly as we did when we were married. That's when I knew our relationship would never be the same. But when I look at you and Rhonda, I understand what my friend was talking about. The light touches, the tender kisses. She loves you, John, and you love her. Put the ring on her finger, John, and ride off into the sunset with her. I wish you all the best, as do everyone else." When Tracy finished speaking, Robert filled the glasses with champagne. "To John and Rhonda and their journey into the sunset," he said. When Rhonda came to the table, John stood up and kissed her on the lips. "If you'll allow me," he said loudly enough for everyone at the table to hear, "I'd like to ask the future Mrs. Montero to dance."